The environment influences gene expression, so we can have the same genotype resulting in different phenotypes. So, when we think about genotype, again, we're thinking about the code or what shows up in the genes. Again, we're going homozygous, heterozygous, homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive. Then ultimately, what the genotype is going to determine what the organism actually looks like from a phenotype perspective, whether they have normal wings or wrinkled wings. But we want to talk about this concept of phenotypic plasticity, where you could have the exact same genotype and get two different or multiple different phenotypes. So even though they have the same code, they can end up with different appearances. And this comes back to environmental influences, which ultimately affect gene expression. So it's not about which genes they have, but which genes are actually expressed. So we can think about this with humans and certain physical features like height and weight. So if you would take one baby, raise them in different environments, you would have different gene expression that could result in different height and weight, even though the genes are the same. Another example here would be hydrangea. So these flowers, depending on how acidic the soil is, you can get different colors flowers. So again, if it's acidic, you get this deep blue, and if it's more basic or neutral, we get red or pink. Now again, this is actually reversible, so you could take these pink magenta flowers, put them in acidic soil, and over time they would change because their gene expression would change. So this is really common with Arctic animals. And this example, again, it could be ptarmigan, it could be hare, it could be fox, but we're looking at this stoat, which is like a weasel. And you could have the same genotype and phenotype, and in different times of the year, they could end up with different coat color variations. And yes, it does help a lot of times with camouflage, but it is actually the time, the daylight hours, and the temperature that affect the gene expression. And those different hormones are going to ultimately cause different um, proteins to be synthesized, and then ultimately different coat colors and thicknesses. Another example we can look at are with alligators, sliders, different types of red-eared sliders, turtles, different types of reptiles. Again, their actual sex is not determined by X and Y or Z and W or anything like that. It's not a chromosomal based um, gender. However, depending on the temperature in the middle of the incubation of the eggs, you could end up with females or males. And again, if it's warmer, they would become females. If it's cooler, they become males. And again, it's that temperature, the environment, that is triggering different genes to be expressed, which ultimately affects the phenotype. Classic example is like tanning. So UV exposure is going to cause different hormones to be released, and it's that damage that's going to have melanocytes to ultimately create more melanin. So again, it's an environmental exposure, the UV radiation, which is going to trigger certain genes to be expressed to make more or less pigment. And again, this, we think about humans and tanning, but this also ties into different marine animals, some types of birds at high elevation. But whether a marine animal is in a shallow pool or at an high altitude lake will also affect the pigmentation in their feathers or scales. So last example here, we have yeast and different types of fungi. Again, if you put them in different environments, if they're around all the same mating type, they won't change. However, in exposure to different mating types, they will release hormones and their phenotype would change to the point where they can actually mate. So again, their environment changes because of the presence of other organisms or opposite mating types, which will affect the release of hormones and ultimately gene expression, which changes their phenotype. So, again, the environment is going to affect gene expression. We can have phenotypic plasticity when the same genotype exhibits different phenotypes.